And we have an interesting conversation coming up. Let me press the buttons and get them on board with us here this morning. We have IUP political science professors Dr. Gwen Torges and Dr. David Chambers with us this morning to talk about impeachment. Let's say good morning, first of all. Hi to both of you.
Good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
It's good to have you both with us. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. And you both have gotten together to do something really, really interesting and educational. After all, you're in the education business, and
we hope so.
It's a question and answer, a post that you have in the news and events section of IUP.edu, removing a U.S. president, Constitution in crisis. So let's talk about that. We'll tell people where to go on the net to get this question and answer session. But we've been hearing for years that we're headed toward a constitutional crisis, and that's become pretty much a catchphrase. Obviously, you both agree that we're there now, aren't we?
I think we are, Todd, and I think one of the problems we face is that many Americans simply do not know that much about the document that governs us, that is the Constitution. So I think what Gwen and I are trying to do is, within our poor powers, rectify that problem to the extent we can and encourage more examination of and consider discussion of the Constitution.
Gwen, you were going to say something?
Yes, thank you. I don't know that I think it's in crisis at the moment. I actually feel like the institutions have held up and have done what they were supposed to do. It's always messy. And so I think that I could agree with David in the sense that it creates a crisis when so many of us aren't aware of what the Constitution says and the other rules of the game and so forth. But as an immediate crisis, I think it was unpleasant, but I don't. I guess I don't think it's an apocalypse just yet.
Let's get both of you to comment on the actual vote yesterday to impeach and where it moves forward. And Gwen, let's start with you.
Okay. Well, in terms of where it moves forward, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in the Senate has expressed that right now the Senate is out, and he said, and not scheduled to come back, and he said he's not going to change that schedule. And it would be awfully tough to meet the time frame. So I'll let David address the issue of whether or not, there can be, they can go forward with the trial post after someone's out of office. But in terms of, we did have that vote. It was somewhat bipartisan. And I think it was part of the reason is that I think it was a little bit less legally wonky than the first impeachment. People understood. It was said in real simple words that the president's words caused or led to some foreseeable violence. And so that was a much more simple charge to make. Again, not in a legal sense, but in a political sense, because an impeachment isn't like a regular indictment. It's the political form of that, which doesn't have the same kinds of due process protection.
David.
And I'll let David take it from there.
David?
Just a couple of things. I mean, first, I think now that we have the impeachment formalized by the House of Representatives, it must, of course, go to the Senate for a trial. Gwen is correct. Speaker McConnell, or Leader McConnell did say this morning that there was insufficient time between now and the inauguration of President-elect Biden to conduct a trial. So that kind of puts us into unprecedented territory. We have never before engaged in an impeachment trial for a president who is no longer a sitting president. So the question becomes, can the Senate conduct such a trial, and what form does that trial take, and what are the consequences that result from that trial? Obviously, the most obvious consequence of an impeachment trial is the potential removal of a sitting president from office. Since that sitting president will no longer be in office, then what does a potential conviction look like? So I think those are questions that have yet to be resolved by the United States Senate. There is talk about if the president is convicted, to then move the next step and bar him from seeking future elective office, federal elective office. That has never before occurred, and most likely will encounter a court challenge, in my opinion. But we to some extent don't know what the process looks like going forward.
Do you find people commenting a lot, or at least some, that there's the feeling out there of why bother at this point if he's going to be out next week anyway?
I think that is true. I mean, when I looked at the House vote yesterday, I think it was notable to me, at least, that it was not easy to characterize Republican opposition to the articles of impeachment. I mean, there were pretty clearly two distinct groups. That is, the group that sided with the majority to vote in favor of the articles of impeachment, and then the other identifiable group of those who were voiced support for this president. But I think the vast majority of Republicans who spoke really focused on procedural issues, that this is a hurried-up process, that there wasn't enough consideration given to this, and that the president will be out of office by the time this process comes to fruition. So I kind of found it interesting that Republicans yesterday grouped themselves into kind of three distinct categories when it came to a consideration of this impeachment resolution.
Gwen, your thoughts on that?
I'd agree with what David said. More broadly, I think a lot of the public feels like, what's the point at this time? And because impeachment and whatever happens in the Senate after that is a political process, of course, members of the House and Senate are listening to what they hear that the Americans want in terms of how it's expressed in opinion polls and whatnot.
Has it surprised you how quickly members of both houses of the aisle, both the Senate and the House, they have turned to I don't want to use the word attack, but certainly they've even considered censuring some of their own members simply for expressing their opinions on the floor?
Sure. I was a little bit surprised that there was calls from at least some Republican members in the House to remove Representative Cheney from her leadership position because she was breaking ranks. And so I was a little bit surprised by that. But I think that right now the Republican Party is trying to figure out which direction it goes from here. And of course, that's a tough decision, and it's a complicated decision. And so, and I think right now people in the House are. It's an emotionally fraught time. There was a lot of emotion expressed from a lot of different angles. I think they're still a little bit rattled by what went on.
We're talking this morning with IUP political science professors Gwen Torges and David Chambers. Dave, there's also a feeling that, the public is exhausted by all of this, and they were sort of looking forward to the inauguration of a new president, the incoming new administration, as a way that maybe we can finally put all of the noise of Washington from the last 4 or 5 years behind us and finally get together and start. Does this whole impeachment process, does it prolong things, and would it hinder President Biden as he moved forward?
That's a very good question, Todd, and it's a question that I frankly can't answer. I mean, I think that President-elect Biden, as he moves into office, is going to encounter some significant difficulty in trying to focus the attention of the country on some significant policy issues, like how do we address the terrible consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is clear that many in Congress were deeply rattled by what happened a week ago, and that further investigation has revealed that it may have been even a more terrible event than we had initially thought. And so I think there is a great deal of partisan rancor right now in the Congress about how this occurred, why this occurred, and how do we stop it from occurring again. So, I don't expect this is going to go away anytime soon.
With the switch of the Senate, though, to Democratic control and the manner in which those whole processes are set up in terms of hearings on this or on that issue, would one expect that some of the biggest concerns might be pushed back or even moved forward on the agenda, especially when you consider that the world is watching the way things have gone down in the United States the last couple of years or the last couple of weeks, and it seems as if the world is saying, shame on you, America.
I think that will be the challenge, frankly, for the incoming Biden administration, to try and strike a middle ground between the conclusion of the progression of the impeachment process, while at the same time, trying to bring some focus on the significant issues that it wants to address. Rather than a potential impeachment process shutting the Congress down, for several weeks. Is there a way that such a process could be conducted at the same time that other business was being transacted by the House, and particularly the Senate? So I think that will be the challenge that the incoming administration and the incoming leadership, particularly in the Senate, is going to have to resolve.
You can visit iup.edu and go to the news and events section to find the conversation led by David and Gwen, Removing a U.S. President, Constitution in Crisis, which is actually the first in a series of events at IUP's website where folks can learn about Constitution in Crisis. Gwen, David, some final thoughts this morning. Impeachment, a good idea, a bad idea, an idea that's going to move forward and really bog down the United States in the first 6 months or so of this year. Gwen?
I'm not going to say whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. Although we get the sense, because there was some pull away from a strictly party vote, that a number of people felt that it was important. I mean, this was a completely different kind of situation than the last impeachment that happened, or even the one that happened under Clinton's watch. Those both were kind of wonky, and a lot of people would kind of say, what are we talking about here? But this one, I think, was a little bit more clear-cut. Here's where I think that the problem and the concern lies going forward is that we do still protect and honor free speech, and it's tough to draw that line about at what point is it going to incite an imminent action. And so I hope that we don't go too far in trying to tamp down free expression.
David, your final thoughts.
Well, as a lifelong student of the American presidency, I lament any time the impeachment process has to be invoked, because frankly I fear the damage that such a process, should it move to its ultimate conclusion, that is the removal of an American president. I lament the potential damage that such a process might do to the institution. By the same token, I understand the necessity of such a process, so that if a process is necessary, that it becomes important that we fully examine the nature of the complaint and determine to what extent a president is culpable of something the Constitution ill-defines as high crimes and misdemeanors. So it is a difficult time, and it is not a time that I particularly relish, but as I say, as a student of the presidency, it's certainly been something that has long been on my mind. This is the fourth impeachment process that I've been part of as an observer over the course of my life.
The Gosh, I'm having all kinds of difficulty. There's so many different questions here, and we're out of time to ask you any of them. It's the first series in a series called Constitution in Crisis at iup.edu/news and events. And Gwen Torges, David Chambers, thank you so much for visiting with us here this morning. You see, I've been fighting this all morning long. This so many things happening out there, and it's got me all bollocksed up too.
I understand, Todd. Believe
it's hard
me.
to
Thanks
make
for
sense
having us.
of it all, but yeah, thanks so much for your thoughtful questions and for having us on.
I appreciate your time here this morning. We'll do better next time. Thanks, and have a wonderful day today.
Thanks. You too.
You too, Todd.
You too.
You too, Todd.
You too.
You too.